Hey everyone, it's Jonathan and welcome back to Every Version Ever. Today I'm joined by Nicki from Trivial Theater and Dan from TYTD Reviews to talk about an early 2000s era made-for-TV movie starring Kaley Cuoco, Kevin Zegers, and Nick Carter from the Backstreet Boys. This is a modern adaptation slash sequel to The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. It has characters that correspond to each of the Sleepy Hollow characters, but also the Washington Irving story is canonically real history in this movie. It's kind of bizarre, kind of terrible, kind of boring, but also kind of hilariously dumb. This is actually the perfect kind of movie to do for a podcast because it's so much more fun to talk about than it was to watch, and there was no one more perfect to discuss this film with than Nicki and Dan. I take it neither of you guys had seen this.
No.
I don't even remember hearing about it.
Well, I'd never heard of it, but I'm not into horror very much, so I just discovered it because I was looking for versions of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow for this series.
Yeah. See, I
Hmm.
wouldn't even necessarily, there's Halloween movies and then there's horror movies. This is a
Hmm.
Halloween movie, like again, and
Mm-hmm.
I said it before we got rolling, and no shade on it. It's not a terrible movie, but it reminds me more of something like a Disney Channel or like a Lifetime movie. It's kind of like a PG-13 Disney or a Lifetime movie or something in that vein. There's a little bit of blood, but not a lot. There's like that edge of nudity, but not really. It's kind of in that realm.
Hmm.
The Halloween or the Sleepy Hollow stuff is kind of adjacent to the drama of high school, kid with his dad and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had read that this was rated R, so I was expecting something a
Serious?
lot worse than what
What?
this was. It
Where?
was much tamer than I expected.
How? And I mean no disrespect, but how?
I don't
They
know.
showed one kill on screen. I actually kept track of it. They had one. All the other kills they cut away and then they cut back and the person's on the floor. They showed one actual kill in the entire movie. The thing that annoyed me as well, and I looked at this up, the film was an hour and 22 minutes long. 5 minutes of that hour and 22 is end credits, and 3.5 minutes is opening titles. So like you're already down to an hour and 16, hour and 17 before before the film's even started.
Okay, so I'm just looking up like the certification thing as to why it was listed as an R-rated movie. One instance of sex and nudity. Girl wearing a nurse costume starts to unbutton and disengage her. And I mean, they kind of imply certain acts, but they really don't go into it. Um,
They
Gore
don't
and
even really
violence.
show any nudity either, though. That's the thing. It's like
Yeah,
she unbuttons her blouse. You see a little bit of chest, but no cleavage or anything like that. And
right.
that's it. That's the whole.
I mean, you do
That's
see
the
the guy's
nudity.
head. I mean,
And that was
hmm.
probably like the most disturbing thing in the whole thing, but it looked so fake
Mm.
that it was.
Yeah.
So I'm looking here. Gore and violence. The guy is killed off screen, but you hear the sound of a sword and see his body being dragged. The sheriff is killed by the horseman. Guy is beheaded while he kisses a girl. Shot of her dead body. Profanity is mild. Drug and alcohol is mild. Frightening scenes moderate. This is a PG-13. I don't know how this got an R rating.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it was TV. That might be the thing. So it's more like that. That's probably why it's quote rated R.
Mm.
I would bet because it looks like it was rated R, but it was also rated TV 14 was the original TV rating.
TV
So it's
14 makes more sense.
Yeah.
100%. My assumption is that it's probably I'm not sure where they got the R from there, but
Oh,
yeah.
I'm not actually sure. I was
Oh
reading
no,
about
no.
around and like I never saw like an actual page that said this was rated R. I just saw people talking about it rated R. So maybe it was, I don't
No,
know.
it
Maybe they
was
had that on the DVD. I don't know.
no, the MPAA rated this R for scary images and
Oh,
sexuality.
okay.
But
So it was.
like there are certain things that will rate something as R, and I would not in any universe consider this an R-rated movie. I don't know, maybe it's more than yeah, it doesn't matter, but
I mean, when you consider that films like Halloween, Deadpool, the Friday the 13th movies, they are all R-rated and they go a lot harder than this film did. This
Hmm.
film was like the shallow end of that,
yeah.
if at all that. Um, I don't know. It just blew my mind that it's like I think Triv actually put it best. This is really more of a Halloween movie than a horror movie. It's a film that's of the season, but it's
Yeah.
not really pushing the envelope of the kind of traditional horror elements.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, on the whole, I just kind of I got through it and I just sat there and thought, well, it hits every single trope of a low budget, trying to be a little spooky but not quite managing it type film. It had moments where it just dragged and dragged and dragged in terms of plot line because it's trying to pad the runtime out to a feature length so it could get like a television airing because coming in at about an hour and 20, you can probably put two, maybe three ad breaks in on that, and it'll take you to the hour and a half mark. It's just it's quite a dry film, and they don't really fully engage the horror element of it until the last kind of 20 minutes. Before that, it's basically almost like a high school special.
For most of this movie, I felt like I was watching a bad WB show from when I was a teenager.
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
yeah,
you look at the subject matter of it. Guy moves to a new town. He, entrances the high school. The head football player's like girl. She's got, she's kind of independent and all that good stuff. And he's a kind of a jerk and all that stuff. He's got his dad doesn't understand him. His mom is sympathetic. It's kind of a WB standby in the grand scheme, or CW, or however you want to play it.
it was all just so shallow. That was the big thing that kind of hit me. Every single character was just the stereotype of that type of character. And,
Yeah.
and nothing else. There was no depth. Yet the
Mhm.
Gravedigger was basically just playing Crazy Ralph from Friday the 13th. I mean, all the time he was talking, I just kept in my head hearing, "It's got a death curse." Um, just the cheerleader is a typical cheerleader and nothing else. The main character is just that kind of, can't do wrong, kind of, goes on a bit of a journey type thing, but no, there's no depth. Every single character is just he's this and that's it. It just really left me wanting just a little bit more complexity, even if it was just like characters having ulterior motives to their standard kind of character archetype. It would have been nice to see it do a little bit of a zag where I was expecting it to do a zig, but it was all zig all the time.
I mean, with Brody, the kind of bully slash football player, he kind of turned things around and became a not terrible person.
Mm, a little bit, but he moaned a
Kind
little
of
later
only
in it,
because
didn't
he
he?
was threatened with being branded a coward in Legend.
I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not going to disagree, but he still did
That's the thing, though. It would have been nice to have the script at least acknowledge that he did it of his own accord rather than being
Yeah,
humiliated into it. You know what I mean?
that's true. That's true. I'm not going to say it was a good motive. I'm just saying that he wasn't maimed horribly by the, horsemen, and I don't know. Because
Yeah.
he did have some redeeming value. I bet that was because he was essentially, called out. So
I
Yeah.
was expecting him to die by the end, so I was surprised he made it.
yeah, that surprised me too. Like no one normally there's at least one like one of the bigger characters will have ended up biting it, and none of them did. So
It gave me real Hocus Pocus vibes, but like not good Hocus Pocus.
Hocus
It's
Pocus 2?
well, maybe. Well, you haven't seen that one yet, but maybe.
I
I mean, I
can't.
liked Hocus Pocus 2 better than the first one, so
Oh,
but I didn't grow up with the first one, so I have no
John,
nostalgia.
John. It wasn't terrible. I could have done without the 20-minute segment inside of Walgreens, but that's me.
I, I thought it was funny, but in a bad kind of funny that turned around like so bad it became funny again.
I did enjoy and I think we talked about this last year. I did enjoy the Roomba as a broom. That was pretty good.
And the Swiffer.
Oh, by the way, Dan, we are completely spoiling this for you. Those are some of the more notable parts of that movie. But no,
That's
it
all
wasn't
right, I'll
badly
probably
done.
I'll have a couple of beers and forget it ever happened. But the thing that got, I mean, it's just it's the genericism. Genericism, is that a word? It's how generic this thing really was. I mean, like just looking. I mean, I am a purveyor of early 2000s horror. I enjoy it quite a bit. But it's just it hit every single trope. Everything was like slightly desaturated with a bit of an orange tinge to it. Everything was really shot really darkly. so you could barely see what was happening for most of the film's runtime. They had the obligatory early 2000s grungy sort of rock soundtrack.
That was one of the things that stood out to me the most.
Yeah, that just didn't fit the film at all, but was for somehow just crammed in there. Um, all the characters were dressed painfully early 2000s. Like there wasn't any
I mean, it
subtlety to it
was
at
the
all.
early 2000s.
Well, yeah, but there's dressing in the two. I mean, like there's dressing in the 2000s, like I don't know, Final Destination or the remake of 13 Ghosts, and then there's dressing in the 2000s like you've just stepped out of High School Musical.
I
And
mean,
it's
this
like
was
just the
2004. The way they were dressing was probably what you would find at your average wherever you shop for clothes in 2004, you know? It's not exactly Hot Topic.
I don't know. It just felt too intense. It was like every single possible fashion disaster of the 2000s congregated with these
Again, this
characters.
is when this was in fashion, you know? I mean, they're not going to be dressing in baby doll dresses and stuff like that because that would like and like plaid cause and giant legged jeans because that was like mid 90s that kind of stuff.
I
That
just
would have
think it's
been
a solid.
painful.
I think it's just a solid argument that everybody should always wear morph suits in these films so that they can just green screen on the latest clothes.
Well, I found an explanation for at least one part of this. The movie premiered on ABC Family, but had to be heavily
Ah,
edited before the broadcast in order to make it suitable for a TV audience. Full version can be seen on DVD. So, John, the version that you showed us that was 2 minutes longer, that was probably the non-edited version. So,
I thought of that after I found the thing about things that they had cut out. I was like, oh, that's why there was two versions.
makes sense.
I mean, guys, I don't want to challenge the pedigree of the writing of this thing, but the person who wrote it did Deep Blue Sea 2 and The Goldbergs. So,
I mean, the Goldbergs isn't that bad,
well, he did
but
2 episodes of The Goldbergs.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Were they dressed painfully 80s for your taste?
They were too much. Just green screen them, mocap it. Do what they did with Planet of the Apes. That was fantastic. Just have them all be apes. That would be fun. We'll have the Hollow, but it's an all monkey version.
That actually would be a much better movie.
Not gonna lie, yeah, you're right.
Ichabod Chimp sorted. We'll call it Ichabod Chimp.
Now I want this.
Anyway,
But the only thing I really genuinely enjoyed in this film, being honest from top to bottom, was the Gravedigger character. He seemed to kind of get the tone that this film sort of needed. He reminded me of Quint from Jaws, with a little bit of Crazy Ralph from Friday the 13th thrown in. But he also clearly knew that the script for this was a little bit dry, so he does put a little bit of humor in his line delivery in places. And whenever he was on screen, I kind of perked up a little bit. But outside of his involvement, it was the bit that got me, that made me laugh, was there's a bit in the film where he gives the lead character a book about the history of the Headless Horseman, and he says, you need to read this cover to cover. Everything in this book will be invaluable to you. And then later in the film, he just randomly runs in and goes, we've got to cut the roots down in the graveyard. He's seeping power from the roots. And the main character turns and said, there's nothing about roots in the book. And he goes, I didn't write everything in the book. And it's like, what was the point in telling to read it if it's not informative?
There was so much in this movie that just did not make sense because you had the whole thing like the universe of this movie. This is the story of the Legend of Sleepy Hollow was real history, apparently. And the main character is descended from Ichabod Crane. And his main argument of why I can't be descended from him, so I have a different last name. And then he gives him this whole convoluted explanation of like how his name was changed by different people over the years. And then by the end of the movie, he says that they have to change it. If they have kids, they have to change the last name so that he doesn't have to go through this again. I was like, you at the beginning of the movie, you gave this whole convoluted explanation of why, even though he has a different last name, he's still a Crane. And now you're saying that his kids have to change their last name so they're not Cranes anymore. What?
The best part of that scene, and the thing that made me laugh as well, I picked up on that as well. And the thing that got me though was him saying, you better change his name. I don't want to have to do this again. And I was like, mate, you're a 50 to 60-year-old alcoholic gravedigger. You're not making it to the next kid. I'm amazed you made it to the end of the movie, quite frankly.
Oh,
The
me
fact that he
too.
goes everywhere he goes as well, everybody just assumes he's an alcoholic. He's never drunk in his life.
He's got to live up to the stereotype, gosh darn it.
I feel like the first half of the movie and the second half of the movie were very dumb for completely different reasons. The first was just so stereotypically high school drama dumb, and the second
Mm.
was just like they just started writing things that didn't make sense with the first half of the movie, and we're like, whatever, nobody's gonna care.
Yeah, Final Destination, this wasn't.
No. When I chatted to Triv briefly before we jumped onto the cast, and I basically said to her, it's the kind of movie that you would put on in the background on Halloween whilst you were doing something else. Like it's the sort of film you'd be like prepping the candy bowl with, or you'd be in and out dealing with trick or treaters, and you just go, "Oh, just chuck this film on. It's got atmosphere," and you dip in and out in 5 minute bursts, and you kind of get a bit of a vibe off it, but it's not something that I think I would ever consciously choose to sit down and watch from beginning to end and go, "Oh, this is great. I love this film. It's amazing." It had its moments in the third act, but and I don't want to go too heavy into spoilers, but the ending as well was very predictable, but also very brief. It's basically
It
like
was
halfway
over
through
so
the
quick.
film. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Halfway through the film, they go, "Oh, if you do this, he'll die." And then at the end of the film, they did it, and he's gone in like 2 seconds. It's like, okay, well, that
Yeah, I
was
think
that
he
was an hour
doused
and 20.
himself in I think he doused himself in gasoline or something.
It's pure Mountain Dew,
Yeah, that's also good.
I feel
nice
like
even burn.
the mythology of this movie hardly makes sense at all. Because, like, just going by the book, if the book is real, Ichabod Crane, depending on how you want to look at it, because in the book, it is heavily implied that the Headless Horseman is not real, and he was created by Brom Bones to scare Ichabod Crane out of town so that he would stop hitting on Katrina so that Brom could get Katrina for himself. And if that's the interpretation, then Ichabod is still alive, and then he could go on and have descendants that Ian could be one of these descendants. But if you go with the interpretation that the Headless Horseman was real, then he killed Ichabod. So he couldn't have descendants. And then the whole thing about the thing with the bridge at the end, because like if you assume that he's real, then why does the bridge stop him? Like, yes, it supposedly stops him in the book, but if the legend was made up by Brom to scare Ichabod,
Well, I'm not going to try and play into this because, in the grand scheme, we were putting more thought into this than they did,
yeah.
which isn't an uncommon thing. But you could claim that, you know how, like with Freddy Krueger, stuff kind of manifested because people believed it. I would almost say that, like, because people believed this legend so strongly, that it kind of manifested this into life, or manifested more of it into life.
I suppose that's as good an explanation as
That's
any
all
we
I
got
got.
from the movie itself.
I'll take it. I'm also going to mention here because it's just popped up on my notes. One of my favorite line deliveries in the entire film is near the end where they go on the second hayride and they load the old lady onto the hayride and she goes, "This hay stinks." And the guy goes, "Oh yeah, well don't worry, we'll change it after this." And she goes, "Yeah, yeah, change it." And then it just cuts away and nothing else is done about it.
Yeah, that kind of got me. They're like, "Oh, well, we've got a big important person on this thing. You need to do really well." And it's like it didn't matter really one way or the other. It was literally just
I was
it was a
expecting
nothing burger.
something to come from that woman because they made it seem like she was so important.
Mm.
And then nothing came of it. The best part about her was she went, "How distasteful," when someone got beheaded. That was like the only time I really laughed in the whole movie. Not that it was supposed to be like the movie wasn't supposed to be funny, but like that was the best part.
Oh yeah, it was yeah.
Were you guys familiar with any of the cast?
So Kylie,
Kaley Cuoco?
yeah, I mean she's in Harley Quinn. She was Penny in Big Bang. She's been in a lot of other stuff. Nick Carter, his brother was, I think, one of the Backstreet Boys, or
Nick
was he a
Carter was
Backstreet
in the
Boys?
Backstreet Boys.
Okay, well his
Aaron
brother
Carter
was
was
not.
his brother, who was a singer by himself, I believe.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So,
Which, like, I'm not familiar with the Backstreet Boys, so I had read that there was one of the Backstreet Boys in here, so I was like looking up, like I was watching, I was like, okay, which one is the Backstreet Boys? So I had to like look up and try and figure out, like, cross-reference pictures, like, oh yeah, it's the one Brody. The Brody is the Backstreet Boy.
honestly, I didn't, and I guess it had been quite a while because I kind of grew up on the Backstreet Boys. I haven't paid a lot of attention to where he went and whatnot, but I definitely didn't recognize him as like that Backstreet Boy or as a Backstreet Boy.
Hmm.
The main guy though, Ian, kind of reminded me of Zac Efron. Like I feel like he was specifically cast because he kind of looks like Zac Efron.
Well, Zac Efron probably wouldn't have even been a thing back then. Like, he would have been alive, but I don't think he would have been a name, would he?
Well,
Because he
when
What
did
became
year did High School Musical come out?
yeah,
that
that
would have
would be
been
the
after
question.
this. Because the High School Musical was, I think I was in my 20s, because I still haven't ever. I might have seen it,
Um,
but if I've seen it, I don't remember it.
Right.
I
yeah,
don't think.
2006.
Okay, it's 2 years later. I mean,
But the main guy, Kevin Zegers, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. I actually do kind of know him. He was the star of the Air Bud movies, and I
ah,
loved
okay.
those as a kid, but he was a kid back then, so he's not exactly recognizable. And it's been so many years since I've seen any of the Air Bud movies that I wouldn't have recognized him.
Yeah. I was gonna say too, the Judge Reinhold was a big guy back in the 80s. Like he was a heartthrob kind of like Charlie Sheen or Tom Cruise or any of those guys. Like he was kind of in that group of guys, kind of Brat Pack-esque.
Mm.
God, in one
So
of the worst films I've ever seen, Let's Ruin Dad's Day. Um,
oh.
yeah, it's a
Ooh.
bad movie. It's one of the only films that I like. I give it a really bad review. I say it's one of the worst films I've ever seen because it's one of the only films I've seen that currently, if you showed it to your kids, would probably leave them with messages that could actually put them in harm's way. The plot of that film is that a kid is worried that his parents are getting divorced, so he goes over to try and he goes over to the city with his dad, who's played by Judge Reinhold, to try and ruin his day so that they can reconcile. But the subplot of it is about a young girl who's like 12 years old who meets somebody online anonymously, and they want to link up and like go and hang out. And like all the way through the film, like the parents are just like, "Oh yeah, no, it's fine. You can go and meet this stranger online. It's all good. Everything's great." And then she meets him, and it turns out that it's like a 7-year-old boy, and it's just
Oh.
like
That went in
basically,
the
yeah,
opposite direction I thought it was going.
yeah. And like the whole film is like proper enablement for stranger danger. Like the entire film's kind of motto is, hey, you know what? The parents aren't always right. Sometimes you can go and meet strangers from the internet and it'll just work out.
Oof.
Um, but Reinhold's fine enough here.
Yeah.
I liked his little monologue where he was talking to his wife about how he used to take her to horror movies just because he thought it put women in the mood.
I thought he was incredibly annoying and I wanted him to die.
Yeah.
I was just looking it up here. Judge Reinhold was in the Beverly Hills Cop series. He was in the Santa Claus movies. I
That's
think
the
he
only
was.
reason I recognized him, and I haven't seen Santa Claus in ages, so I didn't remember why
Oh
I
no,
recognized him until I looked him up.
he was also in the Beethoven series. My Brother the Pig.
Oh, I've got My Brother the Pig. That's got Scarlett Johansson in it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
He was also in Ruthless People, Pandemonium. He's in Gremlins.
Yeah.
He's in Gremlins.
He's a very specific type of actor. The one you see him, his performance in The Hollow is kind of reflective of the kind of character he plays more
Eh,
broadly.
yeah, I could see that.
But yeah, he was another thing that I thought was confusing about this movie because the old guy, Van Ripper, who I think is supposed to be descended from another character in The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, the person
Makes
that
sense.
Ichabod was staying with at the time of his either death or disappearance, depending on how you want to interpret the end of the book. He makes such a big deal about Ian being the guy, the only guy who can save them. But I was like, I mean, his dad is a descendant too, and they don't bring that up until the end of the movie. It's like, why are you going after the kid? Why not talk to the adult?
Because the target demographic for this movie, being that it's on ABC Family, is not 40-something-year-old men. It is 14 to 20-year-old women, girls, whatever.
I mean, in fairness, I could totally see them going down like an Ash versus Evil Dead route where they try to recruit the kid, but he just isn't experienced enough. So they go for like the guy in his mid-40s who's just like, fine, whatever. Get rid of him. Okay, fine. Well, with my back, no, not today. Fine. Got any ibuprofen? Yeah, give me some ibuprofen and a pour around. So I'll go sort it. Don't worry. Oh, Jesus. How's this going to affect? Am I going to turn up to work today? Oh, okay, right. We'll get this done quick. Headless Horseman, you can't be any scarier than senior management. Let's get this going. Come on.
See, that would have made this cool.
I would have liked that movie more.
I'd watch that. Or a chimp version.
Yeah.
The only other person that I recognized, and I had to look them up to know why I recognized them, the kid, I think the first kid that dies in the movie, he looked vaguely familiar, and I assumed that he was probably in something I saw as a teenager. Joseph Mazzello. It turns out he was Tim in Jurassic Park.
Oh, no way.
Oh.
That's a good catch. Holy crap.
I didn't catch it. I had to look him up.
But you still recognize, like you knew that you recognized him. That in itself is pretty awesome.
He was so much older that it must have just been just a vague something about his face.
He was a lot less annoying too. I mean, he deserved to die in Jurassic Park. I'm not sure he deserved to die in this. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the main message I kind of came across from this film as the credits rolled was it felt like a film that was missing a bit of bite. It was just missing something to make it actually stand out against the noise that is low budget horror and Halloween inspired cinema. It kind of ended, and I was like, okay, and it would have been nice if there was just a little bit more personality there, a little bit more life behind the eyes, a little bit more, because for the time that it was made, it basically hit every generic trope that it was possible to hit for that part of the decade.
Yeah.
Are you saying that it was too much 2004 for you?
It was way too 2004 for me. I'm a 2005 guy. Insert your own Black Eyed Peas 2008, 2000 and late joke here.
Just going through my notes to see if there's anything I really wanted to talk about. Like I wrote down like the main beats of the movie, but for the most part, I thought it was just kind of boring, and I don't really want to talk about the movie from beginning to end.
Yeah, no, I think that's the thing you could say is it's like kind of like cheap Halloween candy. It'll fill you up for like that minute, but then you're going to completely forget about it and be hungry again in 15 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, I've got like stray notes. Like, I didn't like the fact that a lot of the sort of cine choices were kind of handheld floaty cam. It was just like somebody kind of handheld holding the camera and just gently moving it left and right to kind of give the illusion that it's kind of a bit intense and unpredictable, but it wasn't used properly, so it just made it look like whoever was operating the camera had had a couple of Bacardis.
It's a very good early 2000s choice.
Yeah, well, if it was 5 years earlier, they would have been enjoying a delicious Zima, but...
I think the main things that stood out to me of the movie were the beginning and the end, because for the most part, I think if somebody had looked in on me, I probably would have just had an incredulous look on my face because of how dumb this was. Like the whole explanation of like how he can be a descendant. Like his main argument as to not being a descendant is he has a different last name. But I was like, before he did the whole convoluted explanation, I was like, well, it could have been somebody on your mom's side. Like, your last name doesn't necessarily have to be the same. But then they had this whole ridiculous, convoluted explanation of how he was a Crane, even though he was not a Crane. I was like, oh, whatever. This is so dumb.
Yeah, it almost felt like a sequel. Like they should have had the original and then they should have had this. Not that I'm saying there should have been a sequel, but just the way they were describing, especially at that part, it felt like it should have been Ichabod Crane had a tryst with a lady, the night before, and she ended up getting pregnant and, having the kid, and,
that
to
would
kind
have
of
made more
distance.
sense, actually.
Yeah.
I actually, not that it's the same thing, but you're talking about this being a sequel, I almost kind of wish that they had used this same cast and just made The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. It would have been cheesy, but I think I would have liked it better because you have like everyone in this movie, for the most part, is basically a character from The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. They just have different names. Because like Brody is Brom Bones,
Right.
and Karen is Katrina Van Tassel, and obviously Ian is Ichabod. But I feel like if you had just made the movie, like even keep the modern accents, I think it would have been a lot funnier. Well, not
Oh
that
yeah.
it needs to be, but I would have liked it. I would have been more entertained if they had just done a straight up adaptation instead of like sort of but not exactly adapting it and making it sort of but not exactly a sequel. Like this is the descendant of the main character of the book. Like I feel like it doesn't need to be that convoluted. Just because there was what was that movie? It was like a movie with knights. Like they had modern accents and there was like modern music and
Oh, Knight's Tale. Heath Ledger.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Do something like that, except Legend of Sleepy Hollow. That would have been really entertaining.
Oh yeah,
Mm.
100%.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's not a lot to say about this. I think it almost feels like, and obviously this happens a lot, like the Cloverfield movies past Cloverfield. They had, you know, pre-existing scripts and they added the Cloverfield ending in there to kind of add something to it that gave it a little bit more, oomph,
Hmm.
and name recognition and all that kind of stuff. That's what this felt like. It felt like it was a high school drama, and they're like, "Oh God, we need something to make this stand out from all the other high school dramas we have." And we've got a hole, a hole in our movie schedule for Halloween. What can we do? Well, let's add Sleepy Hollow to this or something.
I just still can't get over the fact that the film's an hour and 17 minutes long and that the Headless Horseman turns up for approximately 30 seconds at the 12-minute mark and then doesn't turn up again until nearly 52 minutes into the film.
That was one thing, and I'm curious. John, I don't know that you've seen this movie, but have either of you seen Trick or Treat from 2007 or eight?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
I have not.
the design, and obviously this came up before Trick or Treat, so you can't. It's more just an observation. But the horseman's head looks so much like Sam's face. Like there's a lot of similarity between the two of them. I
Oh,
thought.
yeah.
I thought he looked
Yeah.
like a misshapen version of the Scarecrow from Batman.
Also true.
Mm.
I should also talk about the end because the end just like I was internally face palming and rolling my eyes through the entire end. It was so stupid. Like obviously like at the end of the Horseman, he's defeated way too quick. I thought it was a fake out, and it sort of was, but not exactly.
Mm.
Because he bursts into flames and he's dead, and that was the end of it. And I was like, what? Like they had like one clang of the sword fight, like one clang exchanged between Ian and the Horseman, and then he bursts into flames. Like what?
The thing that it just reminded me of, and it made me laugh when it happened, was I couldn't get the image out of my head of the exploding bridge from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Just, just the second he touched the bridge, gone.
I literally just watched that for the first time last week.
Nice.
What is your name, Ichabod Crane? What is your quest? Defeat the horseman. What is the average wingspan of an unladen swallow?
Is the answer three?
Ooh, I don't know.
Anyways, the end, it felt like it just kept getting stupider and stupider because you had Ian kissing Karen, and then like Van Ripper, he was already a creepy old man, but then he became like super creepy because like Brody is watching them jealously. And he comes up to him and said, "Don't worry, son. Your reward will be far greater than the warm, supple embrace of tender woman flesh." And I'm just like gagging and
Oh yeah. And there was a lot of that too. It's like, okay, you know what? He's like, okay, we're gonna go to prom first. Okay, cool, great.
well, that's after he asked, "Are you two gonna make babies?" in the most creepiest, dirty old man voice. And it
Yes.
was supposed to be because, like, he clarifies afterwards that he's talking about them, the descendants thing. Like, he wants to make sure that they have her last name, not his, because he doesn't want to go through this again. But he asked that in the most creepy, disturbing way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
But then at the end, after you get the whole convoluted thing, like the last name thing, they're all leaving, and then you hear a growling noise, and then he looks shocked, and then that's the end. So it's like he wasn't actually defeated,
Well, you know, they had to at least pretend there was going to be a sequel, even though there never was going to be a sequel.
Would the sequel have been set in the far future?
If they made a sequel now, that would be so funny.
That would be actually. Just to annoy Dan. And then they're going to be in like 2024 or 2025 fashion. And he's going to be like, why is it in 2025 fashion?
You could link it into my chimp idea and set it in the far future and make it one of the new Planet of the Apes movies.
Oh, yeah, I like this idea.
You've had Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. You could have the Planet of the Apes versus the Headless Horseman.
And use this cast. I want to see Kaley Cuoco as a chimp.
Oh my God. Well, how else are they going to describe them having grown up? I mean,
damn you, horsemen! Damn you all to hell! But yeah, other than that, it was great.
Other than literally everything about it. Sure.
I mean, the horse did a good job.
The credits were quite tidy.
I really enjoyed the random argument about like recording Ian's his John Carpenter marathon. It's like, you know, you could go to the local video store and get all of those. You know, you can rent them.
It was 2004. I think Netflix had a DVD delivery service at that point.
That too.
That's true. That's true. The only reason they had that in there was to make the dad more hateable. And like, why did the dad need to be hateable?
Because it was the early 2000s and parents are bad, man.
I guess so.
What happened to you, old man? You used to be cool. Oh, now I want to see a 70s version of this film. That'd have been cool. I like the fact that we've come up with like at least half a dozen better ideas across this this episode that would have been better than what ended up happening. Because what ended up happening was just kind of like, okay, fine, whatever.
For the most part, except for when I was just incredulous at how stupid it was.
That's a fair point.
It was like 80% boring, 20% incredibly stupid.
1% hot gas.
0.5% funny. The old lady saying how distasteful when she sees somebody get their head chopped off.
That was good. Like, I don't know who that lady was, but yeah, she was probably, her and the horse were the best thing about this movie.
I assume she must work in Congress because you see stuff like that every day. So
yeah,
I didn't write it down, but I think she was somebody famous at one time. I'm gonna look her up.
I was just doing that now. How do you spell hollow? I keep screwing that up.
Hollow.
I spelled it wrong. Dagnabbit. Okay, let's see here. Oh, Eileen Brennan. Okay. And she was Joan Van Etten. So she was Mrs. Peacock in Clue. She was Tess Skeffington in Murder by Death. She's been in a lot of stuff. If you had seen her, you would know her.
Most of the stuff that I feel like I recognize the name of would have been something I probably saw when I was really young, so I don't remember. It's like I think that I've seen Clue, but I think I was really young and maybe I only saw part of it, so I don't remember much of it.
She's quite funny in Clue, highly suggested. And she's really good. I think you would really appreciate Clue and Murder by Death. They're both pretty cute.
Something called Murder by Death is cute.
Yes. Okay, it's dark but cute. It's sort of, they take so it's done in I think the 80s, but they basically took all of the great detectives up to that point. So you get like Hercule Poirot, Miss Marple, Sam Spade. There's a couple of others. Oh, Charlie Chan, and a couple of others, and they're under different names as not to infringe upon copyright, but they all get together to try and solve a mystery. Yeah, it's kind of like Clue a little bit, but it's not. They're both well worth a watch. They're super funny for the 80s, and okay. I think they hold up pretty well today.
So you talk about Miss Marple. It's not based on like an Agatha Christie novel.
No, it's not. It's kind of it's not like Airplane, but it's sort of in that realm. It kind of skews on all of those earlier detectives.
Okay.
But it has, so that there are dark moments, but it's like done in a kind of humorous, funny way. Mm-hmm. It's well put together, so well worth a watch. Like Clue is the better of the two, but Murder by Death is, yeah, especially if you're familiar with those characters. Like being that you do a lot of that kind of stuff, I think you would appreciate some of the nuance that other people that aren't quite as much in the know don't. Like I know there are things that are lost on me, but
Uh, for some of those, like I know the characters, but those aren't ones that I'm super familiar with. But I have thought about doing like a series on Agatha Christie adaptations.
there's a
So
lot of them. You'd be doing it a
I know,
while.
I know. Well, I mean, there's a lot of Alice in Wonderland, and I keep doing those. So it could
That's
be
true.
something that's not, I don't do them all at once.
Oh no, no, absolutely. But that's one just even as a watch. I think you
Hmm.
would appreciate it. Hell,
Yeah,
I'd sit down and watch it with you because it's been a hot minute since I've seen it.
that would be a fun one. Like, well, Clue especially, but both I maybe would want to do.
Yeah. Well, includes its own kind of thing, but yeah, it's if you've ever seen like a play version of it, it kind of does that where it gives you multiple endings and um
Mm,
so
okay.
I think on the new Blu-ray 4K of Clue, they've introduced a feature that randomizes the ending again.
oh, that's cool.
Yeah, because originally I think there was 4 or 5 endings they shot where each person was different, and depending on which screening you went to, you'd get a different ending each
Yep.
time. And they've basically been able to transplant that to disc now, which is quite cool.
That is neat.
I'd heard that there were multiple endings, but I didn't know how that worked. So, like, you didn't know how it was going to end when you went to the theater, even if you had seen it before? Like, you
Yeah,
Exactly.
would randomly get a different ending?
Hmm.
yeah, yeah.
That is an interesting idea for how to do a movie.
I think it'd be interesting for a podcast episode, particularly because, like, you'd all sit down to discuss it, and you'd be like, "And I can't believe this guy was the killer. That guy? No, it was this woman. This woman? No, it was."
And Tim Curry is just he's in it as one of the characters and it's just he is just so fun. Like he is the he's kind of like the narrator of the thing. Like he's kind of the thread that ties everything together. And his energy is just it's amazing. It's awesome.
Well, I love Tim Curry, so I think I need to do this one.
Like again, even if you just watch it, like as a fun watch.
Yeah.
They did a Vinegar Syndrome have put out a documentary about the making of Clue
Oh, I saw
fairly
that.
recently.
Yeah.
That apparently has got some really good reviews as well. So
I should have picked that up. Oh well. Well, there's your recommendations for the moment.
the film was so good that that we diverted into a 10-minute Clue breakup. Sign of quality, rather.
All right, so to summarize, early 2000s. The clothing is too much of 2004. The horse and the little old lady were the best parts of it.
And it would have been better with chimps.
Yes,
I mean, I'm
that's
going to
all
be
you need
honest,
to
Gene.
know.
I didn't care for it. The aesthetic was completely wrong for the time. It just didn't strike me as the kind of movie that had heart or feature, and I'm going to give it 2 thumbs down.
Oh,
I'll give it 3 thumbs down.
Mm.
I'm just gonna give it an eh.
That's
Yeah, I
actually
think
a
it's
perfect review for it.
yeah. Eh.
I came, I saw, I went eh.
It wasn't as bad as Grinch the musical, so
That is actually very true. I would actually definitely watch this rather than watch that again.
Yeah.
Well, I think we probably have said all that there is to be said about The Hollow.
I mean, I have one more thing to say about the Hollow, if I may. Give me a second here. I got to get my voice right. Okay, I'm good.
I don't know what that was, but
That was me blowing a raspberry.
oh, okay.
womp womp. I wouldn't open my Count Chocula for this thing. I'm going to be honest.
I mean, being how far your Count Chocula has to travel, I would hope you wouldn't open it for something like this.
Oh no. Maybe some of the Creeper cereal, absolutely, but Chocula is staying firmly in the box.
That's the review right there.
The review of this movie, the Chocula stays in the box. I repeat, in the box.
Well, I think that's probably going to be all for The Hollow. We will be back in the future for more. But until then, do you want to let people know where they can find you if they would like more from you, Dan?
Yeah, sure. So thank you so much for having me on. You can find me at TYTD Reviews. I'm on YouTube uploading weekly. I should be back up and running now. I think we came back on the 13th of September, so plenty of fun and frolics happening there. I'm also on Twitter and Letterboxd at TYTD Reviews as well. So head over there and say hi. And thanks again.
And Nicki?
As always, John, it's a pleasure. I will try to keep my clothes equally in the early 2000s just to mess with Dan.
Hmm.
I'm not sure what's coming out at this point. It's either going to be ripped shorts of a variety with either fellow creators and or friends of the channel. Otherwise, it'll be reviews for the Halloween season. Just individual or sorry, solo reviews. So stop by and say hi. And yeah, that's about it.
Okay, well, thanks for joining me, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks for listening to Every Version Ever. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and follow my co-hosts as well. My Linktree and all of our links will be in the description below. If you want more of my content, all my podcasts are available on YouTube as well as most podcast platforms. If you enjoyed this show, check out one of the other podcasts or check out my Patreon for bonus and extended episodes you won't find anywhere else. We'll be back soon with another brand new episode, so thanks for listening and we'll see you next time.